Can you share how long, I guess, did you have to wait to get hip replacement? Because that's a tough process to go through.
Yeah, Bridget, it certainly was an ordeal. I waited as long as I could, and I had my first hip replacement in my late 30s, and there were probably 5 years of pretty significant pain and not being able to move the way I wanted. But I was in denial about needing the hip replacement surgeries, even after seeing X-rays and a couple surgeons who informed me that I was going to need them. But I was looking for alternatives. I was doing everything I could to put it off, given my age and given my complete fear of the unknown. And I just didn't want to move forward with that. I hate needles. I don't like getting shots. Certainly don't like giving blood. And the thought of something like the hip replacement surgery was just too much for me to handle. So I did everything I could to delay and look for alternatives, but certainly challenging. And I never realized that 1, 2, 5, 10 years after that, that I would have the life I have now, being active and basically doing whatever I want to do. So it's been a transition and a journey from pain and fear into courage and excitement. So very happy to share all of that information with everybody.
That is cool. I like the way your perspective on that. And I'm glad you finally, right, you obviously had pain for a while. Is it related to osteoporosis? I'm just curious what caused
Yeah,
that.
it's had osteoarthritis in both of my hips,
Gotcha.
and essentially the cartilage in my hips was gone. And I also had something in the first hip. I had something called avascular necrosis, and that is where the blood supply gets cut off to the head, to the ball of the femur, and therefore the tip of the bone, the ball, eventually becomes brittle and just starts to break away.
Oh,
And
wow.
that certainly needed to be treated. And it was one of the things that I took into consideration when I decided to move forward. And here was the thought process. The tip of the bone is brittle. I can have a controlled surgery, or I can put it off and maybe have an emergency if it breaks when I'm in not a great time. And then I'm left with having an emergency hip replacement surgery with a doctor that I didn't know, with components I didn't know, and I basically had no control over. So I had to make the decision, the very difficult decision, to move forward and have as much control over that as possible, meaning the time, the components, the physician, my recovery, the location, all of that. So I took control where I could to move forward.
That's really cool. Earlier I meant to say osteoarthritis. Sorry.
Ah,
I'm at that age. I'm a woman in my late 50s, and they talk about osteoporosis all the time. But anyway, I'm so glad they took care of this. And did you have your children yet? Or I wasn't sure around that. One of them at
yeah.
least?
So I've got 2 daughters now, a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old. And that was one of the driving factors. All right. So before the surgeries, I was in severe pain. I could barely walk. Every step was painful. It even hurt to get up out of a chair. And I was pushing it off as much as I could, looking for alternatives. But I knew that if I did not do something with my hips, that I would not be able to play with my daughter and take care of her and help my wife like I wanted to. So I moved forward because my daughter was about to be born. So 2 months to the day before my daughter was born, I had my first hip replacement. And by the time she was born, I was up moving around, still going through a lot of physical therapy, but I was in a much better position to help out and be the father and the husband that I wanted to be, more so than I would have I continued to delay the surgery.
Right. And it would have been hard on your wife, right? If you
Yeah,
think,
yeah,
I
for
mean,
sure.
yeah, you know what I mean? Because it's hard to, I can't I've never been a single parent. I know some people who have, but I mean, kind of would be that way physically. She would have to do everything because you were in a lot of pain. And I think you did the right thing, because you would probably have to pop a lot of pain medication, which is not good, right? If you didn't do it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, there was definitely some pain medication, but I didn't like taking it. So I tried to keep it to a minimum, but still I had to do something. And I just remember being in the hospital and having my pretty pregnant wife, walking with me into the hospital, and then standing next to me and being while being wheeled into the operating room. So that was very concerning to me. Not only was I uncertain about, the hip and what that was going to do to me in a vacuum, but also what was I going to be able to do to help my wife and take care of my daughter eventually. So a lot of things were weighing on my mind at the time, and definitely a lot of fear from just, I did not like surgery. My philosophy is the less times you can get cut in your life, the better. So the fear of that, the fear of not knowing how I'd be able to help my wife and daughter. So a lot of stress at that time, but just getting through it all is really been a blessing, and happy to really have a very exciting and active lifestyle after all of that.
That's important. You're still here and you can still do it. And that's kind of what, and guys, he has done 2 Ironmans, and he's done some serious, I'm not familiar with this hiking that you've done, the snow basin that you mentioned. That's some very strenuous stuff, in general, but you did it. You had the opportunity to do it, and you made a plan for it, I'm sure.
Yeah. So just going through the recovery, I did a lot of physical therapy to really get me back to where I wanted to be. I had no idea what the outcome would be. I just wanted to be able to play with my daughter and help out around the house. That was like my initial goal. And then a couple of months of going through all the physical therapy, I started to get better. And then my next goal was I wanted to be able to play golf, because I was a golfer, and I wanted to be able to hit the ball, torque my hips like I wanted to, and walk a golf course. And then I was able to do that about a year after my first surgery, and then a year after the second surgery. And then it became of, okay, what else can I do? So then I got back into cycling. I started swimming pretty soon after the surgeries. And then I knew about an Ironman before, but then I thought about, could I do this? And then I backed into, how could I do it? How could I make that possible for me? So I did a lot of math, and I figured out, okay, if I could train this much and do it in this much time, then that's certainly a possibility, and certainly something to pursue. So, it's really interesting that I went from not being able to walk 10 feet without severe pain to completing a couple Ironmans. So huge growth in the physical and the mental areas over the last 10 years.
It's just maybe think about things we take for granted. Like you mentioned, you're able to walk around the golf course, right? You couldn't do that before without having a lot of pain. And it's just little simple things like that. And you did it in little steps. You didn't go jump in and do, Ironman right away. But I think you did it in small steps. You started swimming. I like the way, you did it to be there for your family and to enjoy life. And I also think now you are independent. You have your own business. You're not working for anybody anymore.